The dust hung thick in the air of Red Canyon that August afternoon, swirling in lazy spirals through the main street like ghosts reluctant to leave. The sun beat down mercilessly on the New Mexico territory, turning the red rock formations surrounding the town into shimmering monuments of heat. Inside the Silver Wolf Saloon, the air was cooler but heavier, thick with cigar smoke and the sour smell of spilled whiskey that had soaked into the floorboards over years of violence and vice. James the Wolf Kane sat at his usual table in the far corner, positioned so his back was to the wall and his eyes could see everyone who entered. At 48 years old, he was a man who had survived by seeing threats before they materialized. His gray eyes, cold as winter steel, scanned the room with practiced indifference while his fingers drummed slowly on the table's scarred surface. The gold ring on his right hand engraved with a wolf's head caught the lamplight with each movement. His black suit was immaculate despite the heat, his beard trimmed with precision that spoke of a man who controlled every detail of his world. Around him sat his inner circle, Mad Dog Garrett, whose scarred face twisted into a permanent sneer as he dealt cards. Tommy Six Fingers Monroe, counting money with the careful attention of a man who'd lost a digit for miscounting once before. And Frank Dutton, cleaning his revolver with methodical strokes. The conversation was low, punctuated by occasional laughter that never quite reached genuine mirth. "The railroad's pushing through next spring," Frank was saying, his voice gravelly from too many years of desert dust. "That Hart woman's land sits right in the path. Got the best water source for 20 miles. Kane's expression didn't change, but his drumming fingers stilled. And Mad Dog leaned forward, his yellow teeth visible through his grin. "She ain't selling, boss. Told our boys to get off her property yesterday. Said her husband died fighting for that land, and she'd die before she let criminals take it." He spat the word criminals with mock offense. "Spirited woman," Kane said, his voice flat and unreadable. "Was," Mad Dog corrected, and something in his tone made the room go quiet. "Me and the boys paid her a visit this morning. Explained things more thoroughly." Kane's eyes lifted slowly from the table, fixing on Mad Dog with an intensity that made the larger man shift in his seat. "Explain thoroughly. Just roughed her up a bit, boss. Nothing permanent. Woman needed to understand how things work in Red Canyon." Mad Dog's confidence was already faltering under Kane's stare. "She'll sell now. I guarantee it." Before Kane could respond, the saloon doors burst open with a violence that stopped all conversation. Every head turned toward the entrance, hands instinctively moving toward weapons. But what stood silhouetted against the bright doorway wasn't a gunfighter or a lawman. It was a child. Lily Hart was 8 years old and barely 4 feet tall, but she stood in that doorway like she owned it. Her blonde hair was tangled and wild, catching the sunlight that streamed in behind her. Her blue eyes, huge in her small face, were red-rimmed from crying but blazing with something fiercer than tears. Her faded blue dress was torn at the hem, and her worn boots were covered in the red dust of a 5-mile run from her family's ranch. She was breathing hard, her small chest heaving, and her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "Where is he?" Her voice cracked but carried through the sudden silence like a gunshot. "Where's the wolf?" Piano music died mid-note. Card games froze. Even the bartender stopped mid-pour, whiskey dripping unnoticed onto the floor. 20 hardened criminals, men who'd killed without hesitation and slept without conscience, stared at the small girl who'd invaded their sanctuary. Mad Dog was the first to recover, his laugh breaking the spell. "Well, would you look at this? Little girl's got herself lost." He stood, his hand resting on his gun belt with casual menace. "This ain't no place for children, little miss. You best run along before I ain't leaving." Lily's voice rose, shrill with desperation and rage. She took 3 steps into the saloon, and grown men actually backed away from her. "They beat my mother. They beat her and left her bleeding on our kitchen floor, and I want to know who told them to do it." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the FLIs seemed to stop buzzing. Lily's words hung in the air like an accusation, like a judgment, like a mirror held up to show these men exactly what they were. Doc Henry Sullivan had been sitting quietly at the bar, trying to make one beer last all afternoon while he avoided thinking about all the wounds he'd stitched up without asking questions. Now he straightened, His weathered face creased with concern. Lily? Sarah's been hurt? But Lily wasn't looking at Doc. Her eyes had found James Cain in his corner, had locked onto him with the instinct of a child who understood power even if she didn't understand evil. She pointed at him with a trembling finger. You, she said, and her voice dropped to something worse than a shout, a whisper full of broken hope. Everyone says you run this town. Everyone says nothing happens unless you say so. Tears were streaming down her face now, cutting clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. So I'm asking you, begging you, did you tell them to hurt my mama? Cain hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. He sat there like a statue carved from desert stone, his gray eyes fixed on this tiny girl who'd done what no sheriff, no rival gang, no threat of violence had ever accomplished. She'd rendered him speechless. Mad Dog stepped forward, his face flushing red. Boss, I'll get rid of her. Probably doesn't even know what she's. Sit down. Cain's voice was quiet, but Mad Dog dropped into his chair like he'd been shot. Cain stood slowly, his tall frame unfolding with deliberate grace. He was a full 6 feet taller than Lily, and as he walked toward her, the floorboards creaking under his boots, several men looked away, unable to watch what they assumed was coming. But Cain didn't draw his gun, didn't raise his hand. He stopped 3 feet away from Lily and looked down at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing something that confused him. What's your name? His voice was softer than anyone in that room had ever heard it. Lily Hart. She didn't back away, though her body was trembling like a leaf in wind. My daddy was John Hart. He died 6 months ago from fever, and now it's just me and Mama, and she didn't do nothing wrong. She just wanted to keep our home. Cain's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He glanced at Mad Dog, and in that single look, Garrett saw his death warrant if he'd lied about anything. Your mother, Cain said, turning back to Lily. How bad is she hurt? Her face is all purple and swollen. Her lip is cut open. She was spitting blood. Lily's voice broke completely. I wanted to stay with her, but she told me to run, told me to get Doc Sullivan. But I ran here instead because Doc can stop them from coming back. But you can. The logic was childish and pure and absolutely correct. Cain felt something in his chest, something he thought had died years ago, twist painfully. He saw himself reflected in this child's desperate eyes, and for just a moment, he wasn't the wolf. He was a 10-year-old boy watching his own mother get beaten by men his father owed money to, watching her tell him to run, to hide, to survive. Frank, Cain said without turning, get Doc Sullivan and take him to the Hart Ranch. Now. Frank scrambled to his feet, grabbing Doc's arm. You heard him. Move. Cain looked at Mad Dog, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You hit a woman. Mad Dog's bravado crumbled. Boss, she needed to you. Hit a woman. Each word was a nail in a coffin. In her own home, in front of her child. Cain's hand moved to his gun, and every man in the saloon held their breath. Stand up. Mad Dog stood on shaking legs. He'd seen Cain kill men for far less, had watched him shoot a man through the heart for cheating at cards. Boss, I was just following orders. You said we needed that land. You said I said get her to sell. I didn't say become the kind of coward who beats defenseless women. Cain's voice was getting quieter, which everyone knew was worse than shouting. There's a code, Garrett. Even we have a code. You don't touch women. You don't touch children. You don't go into a family's home and terrorize them like common thugs. But boss, the gunshot was so sudden that Lily screamed and covered her ears. But Cain hadn't shot Mad Dog. He'd shot the floor between Garrett's feet, the bullet splintering the wood and sending up a spray of splinters. Get out of my town, Cain said. If I see you in Red Canyon after sundown, I'll kill you. If I hear you went anywhere near the Hart Ranch ever again, I'll hunt you down personally. Understand? Mad Dog nodded frantically, tripping over his own feet as he backed toward the door. He was gone in seconds, the saloon doors swinging wildly in his wake. Cain holstered his gun and turned back to Lily, who was staring at him with wide, shocked eyes. He crouched down, bringing himself closer to her level, though his knees protested the movement. Up close, he could see the freckles across her nose, the way her lower lip trembled, the fierce love for her mother burning in her blue eyes. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "No one is going to hurt your mother again. No one is going to try to take your land. And anyone who even looks at you wrong will answer to me. Do you understand?" Lily nodded slowly, not quite able to believe what she was hearing. "Good." Kane reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet, extracting several bills. He pressed them into Lily's small hand. "This is for your mother, for a doctor, for repairs to your home, for whatever you need. It's not charity, it's compensation for what my man did." "But why?" The question was barely a whisper. Kane was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes distant, seeing ghosts. "Because a long time ago, I was a boy who couldn't protect his mother, and I swore that if I ever had the power to stop men like that, I would." He stood, his knees cracking. "Today, I have that power." He looked around the saloon at his men, at the criminals and killers who served him. "Anyone have a problem with my decision?" Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. "Tommy, take my horse and ride Lily back to her ranch. Stay there until Doc Sullivan says her mother is stable. Then you guard that property day and night until I say otherwise." He looked at Frank. "Get word to everyone, and I mean everyone, that the Hart Ranch is under my personal protection. The railroad can find another route." Frank nodded quickly. "Yes, boss." Kane looked back down at Lily, and something almost like a smile touched his hard features. "Your mother sounds like a strong woman. Brave, too, to stand up to men like us." "She is," Lily said fiercely. "She's the strongest person I know." "I believe you." Kane walked back to his table and picked up his hat. "Come on, I'll ride with you and Tommy. I want to apologize to your mother personally." As they walked toward the door, Lily looked up at him, confusion and hope warring on her face. "Are you a good man?" The question stopped Kane in his tracks. He thought about all the things he'd done, the lives he'd ruined, the blood on his hands that no amount of washing could ever clean. He thought about the empire of fear he'd built, the way mothers use his name to scare children into behaving. "No," he said honestly, "I'm not a good man, but maybe today I can do one good thing." They stepped out into the brutal afternoon sun, and as Kane helped Lily onto his black stallion, he felt the eyes of the town on him. News would spread fast. The wolf had gone soft, had been manipulated by a child, had lost his edge. There would be challenges. There would be men who thought this was weakness they could exploit. Let them come, Kane thought. Let them all come. The ride to the Hart Ranch took 30 minutes. Lily sat in front of Kane, her small body stiff with worry, while Tommy rode alongside them. The landscape rolled past in shades of red and brown, the sun slowly sinking toward the western mountains, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. The Hart Ranch was modest, a small wooden house with a sagging porch, a barn that needed new boards, a corral with 2 horses. But the land itself was beautiful, with a clear stream running through it, cottonwood trees providing shade, and grass still green despite the drought that had turned most of the territory brown. Kane could see immediately why the railroad wanted it. Water was worth more than gold out here. Doc Sullivan's horse was tied to the porch rail, and they could hear voices inside, Doc slow and soothing, a woman's hoarse and painful. Lily scrambled down from the horse before Kane could help her and ran for the house, bursting through the door with Kane and Tommy following behind. Inside, Sarah Hart sat at a rough-hewn kitchen table while Doc Sullivan cleaned the wounds on her face. She was 32 but looked older right now, her face a canvas of purple and yellow bruises, her left eye swollen nearly shut, her split lip still seeping blood. When she saw Lily, relief flooded her battered features. "Baby, I told you to." She stopped when she saw Kane filling the doorway behind her daughter, his tall frame and black suit unmistakable. Fear flashed across her face, and she instinctively moved to put herself between Kane and Lily. "Mrs. Hart," Kane said, removing his hat. "I'm James Kane. I know who you are." Sarah's voice was thick, distorted by her swollen mouth, but it still carried steel. "Come to finish what your man started?" "No, ma'am. I came to apologize." The words felt strange in Kane's mouth, unfamiliar as a foreign language. "What happened to you happened without my knowledge or consent. The man responsible has been expelled from Red Canyon permanently." Sarah laughed bitterly, then winced at the pain it caused. And I'm supposed to believe that? That the great wolf of Red Canyon doesn't know what his own men do? Believe what you want, Kane said evenly, but the facts are these. No one will bother you or your daughter again. Your land is under my protection. The railroad will have to find a different route. And this, he pulled out another stack of bills and laid them on the table, is restitution for your medical expenses and repairs to your property. Sarah stared at the money like it was a snake. I don't want your blood money. It's not blood money. It's justice. Kane's voice hardened slightly. Mrs. Hart, I'm not offering this out of kindness. I'm not a kind man, but I have rules, and my men broke those rules when they came here. This is me correcting that error by throwing money at it. Sarah's good eye blazed with anger. You think money makes up for what they did? For the terror my daughter felt? For her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Lily ran to her mother, wrapping her small arms around her. Mama, he helped me. He shot at the mean man and told him to leave town forever. Sarah looked up at Kane, tears mixing with blood on her cheeks. Why? It was the same question Lily had asked, and Kane found himself giving a different answer this time. Because I've seen too many strong people broken by men who mistake cruelty for strength, and I'm tired of being part of that story. Doc Sullivan, who'd been silent throughout the exchange, cleared his throat. Sarah, your cheekbone might be cracked. You need to rest, and you need someone here in case you have a concussion. I can stay tonight, but Tommy will stay, Kane interrupted. He'll sleep in the barn and keep watch. Anyone comes near this property, he'll deal with them. He looked at Tommy, who nodded understanding. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Kane's face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Who are you really? She finally asked. Because the monster everyone describes wouldn't do this. I'm exactly the monster they describe, Kane said quietly. But even monsters can remember being human sometimes. He put his hat back on. Doc, make sure she's taken care of. Send me the bill for any additional supplies or medicine. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mrs. Hart, you have my word for whatever that's worth to you that you and your daughter are safe. My organization will protect this land like it's my own. Why would you do that? Sarah pressed. What do you get out of it? Kane looked at Lily, who was still clinging to her mother, her small face pressed against Sarah's shoulder. Redemption's probably too strong a word, he said. But maybe a reminder that I used to be someone else. Someone better. He walked out into the evening air, which had finally cooled with the setting sun. The sky was spectacular, deep purple and orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made you understand why people fought so hard for this harsh land. Tommy followed him out to the horses. Boss, Tommy said quietly, the boys are going to talk. They're going to say you've gone soft. Let them talk. Kane swung up into his saddle. Anyone who wants to test whether I've gone soft can do it face to face. We'll see how that works out for them. What about the railroad? They've invested a lot of money in that route. Tell them to go around. There's plenty of empty land in New Mexico. Kane gathered his reins. And Tommy? Anyone, and I mean anyone who comes near this ranch with bad intentions, you put them down. Don't wait for my permission. Don't hesitate. Protect them like they're your own family. Yes, sir. Tommy hesitated. Sir? Can I ask, what changed your mind? About the land? About everything? Kane thought about the question as his horse shifted beneath him, eager to move. He thought about that little girl standing in his saloon, trembling but defiant, demanding justice in a town where justice had been dead for years. He thought about his own mother, who died when he was 12, who'd spent her last words telling him to be better than the men who'd destroyed their family. Sometimes, he said finally, it takes a child to show you what you've become. To hold up a mirror and make you look at yourself clearly for the first time in years. He nudged his horse forward. Stay alert, Tommy. I'll send supplies tomorrow. The ride back to Red Canyon gave Kane time to think, and thinking was dangerous for a man like him. Thinking led to questioning, and questioning led to doubt, and doubt led to vulnerability. In his line of work, vulnerability got you killed. But he couldn't stop replaying the scene in the saloon. The way every hardened criminal in that room had frozen when Lily demanded justice. The way her pure, uncomplicated morality had cut through years of rationalization and moral compromise. She hadn't seen him as the wolf, the legendary criminal who controlled territory from Red Canyon to Santa Fe. She'd seen him as someone with power who could choose to do the right thing, and he had chosen. For the first time in years, he'd chosen something else off it, other than fear, other than control. It felt strange, foreign, almost like weakness, but it also felt like something else, something he hadn't experienced in so long he'd almost forgotten what to call it. It felt like freedom. When Kane rode back into Red Canyon, the sun had fully set and the town was lit by lamplight spilling from windows and doorways. The Silver Wolf Saloon was quieter than usual, conversations dying as he dismounted and walked through the doors. His men were waiting, Frank, Six Fingers, and a dozen others. They stood as he entered, their faces carefully neutral, waiting to see which version of their boss had returned from the Hart Ranch. Kane walked to his usual table and sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of his 48 years. He poured himself a whiskey and drank it in one swallow. "Anyone have something to say?" he asked the room. Silence. "No one thinks I made a mistake today?" More silence. Then Frank cleared his throat. "Boss, I think we've been doing business one way for a long time. Maybe too long. Maybe we forgot that there are lines even we shouldn't cross." Kane looked at him with surprise. Frank had been with him for 15 years, had helped build this empire from nothing, had never once questioned a decision. "That little girl," Frank continued, emboldened by whiskey and honesty. "She reminded me of my own daughter, the one I haven't seen in 6 years because she's too scared of what I've become." He looked down at his hands. "Made me think about what kind of man I am, what kind of legacy I'm building." Six Fingers nodded slowly. "My sister was widowed last year, struggled to keep her farm. Men came around, threatened her, tried to force her to sell cheap." He met Kane's eyes. "I helped them because you paid me to. I've thought about that every day since, about how my own nephew looked at me after." Kane let the words settle, feeling the weight of them. He'd built his organization on fear and loyalty, had demanded absolute obedience, had never tolerated weakness or sentiment. But maybe that's exactly what had led to Mad Dog Garrett thinking he could beat a woman in her own home. Maybe by removing all moral boundaries, Kane had created monsters worse than himself. "Things are going to change," Kane said finally. "We're still a criminal organization. I'm not delusional enough to think we're suddenly heroes. But we're going to have rules. Real rules. No women, no children, no taking from people who can't afford to lose. We target railroad barons who've already stolen their fortunes, corrupt officials who profit from misery, big ranchers who cheat small farmers. That's going to cut into profits," Six Fingers pointed out. "Then we'll make less money." Kane poured another whiskey. "I'd rather run a smaller operation with a code than an empire built on the backs of widows and orphans. And if some of the boys don't agree," Frank asked carefully, "then they can leave tonight." With a month's pay and a recommendation to find another crew, Kane's voice hardened. "But anyone who stays follows the new rules. Anyone who breaks them gets the same treatment Mad Dog got or worse." Over the next 3 days, word spread through Red Canyon and beyond like wildfire. The wolf had gone soft. The wolf had been manipulated by a child. The wolf's organization was falling apart. Rival gangs and opportunists began circling, sensing weakness. Kane expected it, welcomed it even, because it gave him the opportunity to show that mercy didn't mean weakness, and that having standards didn't mean he'd lost his edge. The first challenge came on the 3rd night. A crew from Santa Fe, 6 men led by a gunfighter named Blackwood, rode into Red Canyon and went straight to the Silver Wolf. They pushed through the doors with the swagger of men who thought they were about to claim territory from a has-been. Blackwood was younger than Kane, maybe 35, with the kind of polished cruelty that came from never having faced real consequences. He wore matched revolvers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Kane," he said, not bothering with titles or respect. "Heard you've developed a conscience. Thought I'd come see for myself if the rumors were true." Kane was at his usual table, playing solitaire with worn cards. He didn't look up. "They're true. But if you came expecting to find me vulnerable, you've made a mistake." "Have I?" Blackwood laughed, and his men fanned out behind him. "See, I figure a man who won't hurt women and children is a man who's lost his nerve. And a man who's lost his nerve can't hold territory." Kane laid down another card, the Queen of Spades. You're confusing mercy with weakness. Common error, usually fatal. Then prove me wrong. Blackwood's hand moved toward his gun. Draw. What happened next became legend in Red Canyon. Kane didn't draw. Instead, he flipped the table cards, whiskey, everything directly into Blackwood's face. While Blackwood stumbled back, blinded and confused, Kane was on his feet, his revolver out and pressed against Blackwood's forehead before the younger man's guns had cleared their holsters. Bang! Kane said softly, "You're dead." Behind Blackwood, his 5 men found themselves facing Frank, 6 Fingers, and a dozen other guns, all drawn and aimed with absolute steadiness. "Here's how this works," Kane said, not moving the gun from Blackwood's forehead. "Having principles doesn't mean I won't kill you. It means I'll only kill you if you deserve it. And riding into my town, into my saloon, and disrespecting me." He cocked the hammer. "That qualifies." Blackwood's face had gone pale, his swagger evaporating. I didn't mean yes, you did. You came here planning to take my territory, my business, my reputation." Kane's voice was conversational, which made it more terrifying. "The old me would have killed you and your men and dumped your bodies in the canyon as a message. The new me is going to give you a choice." "What choice?" "You can die here tonight and prove that I'm exactly as dangerous as I've always been." Kane paused. "Or you can ride out of Red Canyon, spread the word that the wolf's new rules don't make him any less deadly, and live to see tomorrow." "Your choice." "You have 5 seconds. We'll leave," Blackwood said quickly. "We'll leave right now." Kane slowly lowered his gun and stepped back. "Smart choice. But if I see you or any of your men in my territory again, there won't be a second chance. Understand?" Blackwood nodded frantically and backed toward the door, his men following. They were gone within seconds, the sound of their horses fading into the night. Kane righted his table and started picking up cards. "Anyone else want to test whether I've gone soft?" No one spoke. "Good," Kane said. "Frank, tomorrow I want you to ride out to the Hart Ranch. Check on them. Make sure Tommy's doing his job. Also, find out if Sarah needs anything, supplies, repairs, whatever. We're going to make sure that family thrives, that they become an example of what we protect now instead of what we prey on." Over the following weeks, something strange happened in Red Canyon. Slowly, cautiously, the town began to change. Women walked the streets with less fear. Small business owners stopped paying protection money not because Kane told them to, but because his new rules meant his organization no longer extorted the helpless. Kane's profits did drop, exactly as 6 Fingers predicted. But the men who stayed with him and most did seem different. More focused, more purposeful, like they were building something instead of just taking. The Hart Ranch became a symbol. Tommy's permanent presence there sent a message that couldn't be misunderstood. The wolf protected the vulnerable now. And because the wolf protected them, others did too. Local farmers started helping Sarah repair her property. The general store gave her credit without collateral. Even the corrupt sheriff still on Kane's payroll made sure no drifters bothered her. Sarah herself was recovering slowly. Doc Sullivan visited twice a week, and each time he reported back to Kane that she was healing well, though the psychological scars would take longer than the physical ones. A month after Lily's desperate visit to the Silver Wolf, Kane rode out to the Hart Ranch himself. It was a Sunday morning, the sky so blue it hurt to look at, the air finally cooling with the approach of fall. He found Sarah outside, hanging laundry on a line stretched between 2 trees, while Lily played nearby with a wooden horse Tommy had carved for her. Sarah saw him coming and stiffened, but she didn't run. The bruises on her face had faded to yellowish green, and the swelling was gone. She looked more like herself now, pretty in a careworn way, with lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter before grief had found her. "Mr. Kane," she greeted him, her voice neutral. "Mrs. Hart." He dismounted, leaving his horse to graze. "I wanted to check on you personally." "We're fine," Sarah said, but her tone softened slightly. "Better than fine, actually. People have been kind, helpful. I'm not used to that anymore." Lily ran over, her face lighting up. "Mr. Kane, look what Tommy made me." She held up the wooden horse proudly. Kane crouched down to examine it, and despite himself, he smiled. "That's fine craftsmanship. Tommy was always good with his hands." He says you saved us, Lily said with the blunt honesty of children. Is that true? I think you saved yourselves, Kane replied. I just provided some assistance. Sarah had walked over to join them, wiping her hands on her apron. Why did you really come here today, Mr. Kane? Kane stood, his knees protesting again. He was getting old for this life. I wanted to thank us. Sarah looked confused. For what? For reminding me who I used to be, who I could be again, maybe. He looked out across the ranch, at the stream catching sunlight, at the land Sarah's husband had died to protect. I've done terrible things, Mrs. Hart, things that can't be undone or forgiven. But that day in the saloon, when your daughter demanded justice from a man who'd forgotten what justice meant, something changed. You're not looking for forgiveness, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. No, I don't deserve that. Kane met her eyes. But maybe I'm looking for a reason to be better. To build something instead of just destroying. Your family, your courage gave me that reason. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those intelligent eyes. You know what I think, Mr. Kane? I think you're still deciding who you want to be. And that's terrifying for someone in your position, because it means you might have to give up everything you've built. You're right, Kane admitted. It is terrifying. But you're doing it anyway. I'm trying. Sarah glanced at Lily, who was showing the wooden horse to Kane's horse, making them talk to each other in the serious way children did. My daughter came to you because she believed you could help, even though everyone told her you were a monster. Children see things adults don't, they see potential, possibility. Maybe she saw something in you that you'd forgotten was there. Maybe. Kane said softly. Don't waste it, Sarah said. Don't let her courage be for nothing. If you're going to change, really change, then commit to it. Don't go halfway. Don't give up when it gets hard or expensive or dangerous. That's good advice. I'm full of good advice. Comes from being married to a stubborn idealist. Sarah's smile was sad. John believed people could change, could be better than their worst moments. I think he would have liked what you're trying to do. Kane felt something twist in his chest again, that unfamiliar sensation that might have been emotion if he'd allowed himself to feel such things. I should go. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. We are. Thanks to you and to Lily's bravery. Sarah touched his arm briefly. Be careful, Mr. Kane. Men like you always have enemies. When you change the rules, some of them will come for you. I know, Kane said. I'm counting on it. He rode back to Red Canyon with the sun climbing higher, turning the red rocks into walls of flame. He thought about Sarah's words, about commitment and change, about not going halfway. She was right, of course. He'd started down this path, but he hadn't fully committed to it. He was still hedging his bets, still keeping one foot in the old world. That needed to change. When he reached town, Kane went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Morton was a fat, lazy man who'd been in Kane's pocket for 5 years, looking the other way while Kane's organization operated freely. Morton, Kane said, tossing a bag of money on the desk. That's 3 months' severance. You're done. Morton looked up with confusion and greed roaring on his features. Done? What do you mean done? I mean you're fired. Pack your things and leave town. I'm putting someone honest in your position. You can't do that. The town council will do what I tell them to do, Kane interrupted. But don't worry, in a few months, they'll be making their own decisions. I'm getting out of local government entirely. No more bribes, no more control, no more corruption. Morton's face reddened. You're crazy. You're throwing away everything you've built. No, Kane said calmly. I'm building something new, something better. Now get out. Over the next 3 months, Kane systematically dismantled the corrupt infrastructure he'd spent years creating. He stopped bribing officials. He released his hold on local businesses. He redirected his organization toward genuinely criminal targets: the railroad executives who were price gouging settlers, the corrupt land office agents who were stealing from farmers, the mining companies that were working children in dangerous conditions. It wasn't easy. Some of his men left, unable to adapt to the new way of operating. Others were killed by rivals who saw the transition as opportunity. Kane himself was shot at twice, once by a disgruntled former associate, once by a railroad hired gun who didn't appreciate Kane's interference in land acquisition schemes. But Kane survived. He always survived. What surprised him most was the support he received from unexpected quarters. Small ranchers and farmers, people who'd once feared him, began passing information about corrupt officials and predatory businessmen. They didn't trust him, not completely, but they recognized that he was genuinely trying to redirect his power toward justice rather than exploitation. Doc Sullivan became an unlikely ally, serving as Kane's conscience and advisor. "You're walking a dangerous line," Doc told him one evening over whiskey in the saloon. "You're trying to be a criminal with a code, an outlaw for justice." "It's a contradiction, James." "I know," Kane admitted. They'd moved past formalities over the weeks, though Kane still couldn't quite think of himself as anyone's friend. "But what's the alternative? I can't undo the past. I can't bring back the people I've hurt. All I can do is try to do less harm going forward." "That's not nothing," Doc said gently. "Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing differently in the present." "Who said anything about redemption?" Kane's voice was sharp. Doc smiled. "No one, but that's what you're looking for. Whether you admit it or not." Winter came to New Mexico, bringing cold winds that howled through the canyons and snow that dusted the red rocks white. The Hart Ranch prospered under Tommy's protection and the community's support. Sarah had hired 2 ranch hands with the money Kane had given her, and the property was thriving. Fences repaired, buildings reinforced, livestock healthy and multiplying. Kane visited occasionally, always with a practical excuse, checking on security, ensuring Tommy had what he needed, delivering supplies. But Sarah saw through his pretexts. "You can just visit," she told him one December afternoon while they watched Lily play in the light snow with Tommy's dog. "You don't need an excuse." Kane was uncomfortable with the implication that he wanted friendship or connection or something as simple as company. "I'm not good at just visiting. I noticed." Sarah's breath misted in the cold air. "But you're trying. And that counts for something. Does it?" Kane watched Lily spin in circles, trying to catch snowflakes on her tongue, laughing with pure joy. "Sometimes I think I'm fooling myself. That beneath all these changes, I'm still the same man who built an empire on fear." "Maybe you are," Sarah said bluntly. "Or maybe you're both the man you were and the man you're becoming." "People aren't just one thing, Mr. Kane. We're complicated, contradictory, constantly changing." "James," he said quietly. "You can call me James." Sarah looked at him with surprise and something that might have been warmth. "James, then." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lily play, until the sun began to set and painted the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Kane realized with strange clarity that this was what peace felt like, standing in the cold beside a woman who'd once feared him, watching a child who'd once confronted him, feeling something other than the constant vigilance that had defined his life for decades. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was worth protecting. Christmas came to Red Canyon, and with it came trouble. A gang from Texas, the Cordell brothers, known for their brutality, rolled into town with 20 men and a reputation for taking what they wanted. They'd heard about Kane's new rules and, like so many others, mistook principle for weakness. They made their move on Christmas Eve. Kane was at the Hart Ranch, having been invited for dinner, a gesture that surprised him more than he wanted to admit. Sarah had insisted, saying that no one should be alone on Christmas, and Lily had made him promise he'd come. So there he was, sitting at their modest table while Sarah served stew and fresh bread, feeling more out of place than he ever had in his life. Tommy burst through the door, his face pale and urgent. "Boss problem. The Cordells are in town. They've taken over the saloon and are demanding you come back to discuss terms. They've got hostages, women and children from the Christmas service at the church." Kane was on his feet instantly, the warmth of the evening evaporating. "How many?" 20 gunmen, maybe more." Tommy was already moving toward the door. "They're saying if you don't come back alone and unarmed, they start killing people every hour." "No," Sarah said sharply. Kane turned to see her standing with her arms crossed, her face set with determination. "You're not going alone and unarmed. That's suicide. It's also the only way to keep those people alive," Kane replied, already strapping on his gun belt. "They want me. And they'll get me, but they'll get me on my terms, not theirs." James Sarah's voice cracked slightly on his name, and Kane felt that twist in his chest again. I'll be fine. He lied. I've survived worse odds. Lily had been sitting quietly, but now she stood and walked over to Kane. She took his hand, her small fingers barely wrapping around his palm, and looked up at him with those impossibly blue eyes. You're going to save them, she said. Not a question. A statement of absolute faith. I'm going to try, Kane said. You will, Lily insisted. Because you're not a bad man anymore. You're the man who helps people. Kane crouched down to her level, and for the second time in his life, he let himself be vulnerable in front of this child. Lily, I need you to understand something. I'm still dangerous. I'm still a criminal. The things I've done don't disappear just because I'm trying to do better now. I know, Lily said seriously, but you're dangerous in a good way now. You're dangerous to bad people. The simplicity of it, the absolute clarity of a child's moral universe almost made Kane smile. Take care of your mother while I'm gone. I will. Kane stood and looked at Sarah, who was blinking back tears she was too proud to shed. If I don't come back, you'll come back, Sarah interrupted firmly. Because I'm not done being angry at you for what your organization did to me, and you don't get to escape that conversation by getting yourself killed. Despite everything, Kane did smile at that. Yes, the ride back to Red Canyon was the longest of Kane's life. Tommy rode beside him, silent and grim, while the cold wind cut through their coats and turned their breath to fog. The stars were brilliant overhead, the kind of perfect Christmas Eve sky that made you believe in miracles, or at least in the possibility of them. Boss, Tommy said as they approached the town's outskirts. You have a plan, right? I always have a plan, Kane replied. What is it? Walk in there. See what they want. Don't let them kill anyone. That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan I've got. They left their horses at the edge of town and walked down the main street. Red Canyon was eerily quiet, windows dark, doors barred. Everyone who could had locked themselves inside, praying the violence would pass them by. The only light came from the Silver Wolf Saloon, which blazed with lamplight and echoed with harsh laughter. Kane stopped at the entrance and turned to Tommy. Stay here. If I'm not out in an hour, ride to Santa Fe and get the territorial marshal. Tell him everything, who I am, what I've done, what's happening here. Let the law handle the Cordells. Boss, I'm not leaving you, that's an order, Tommy. Kane's voice was steel. If I die in there, someone needs to make sure the Cordells don't get away with this. Someone needs to protect this town after I'm gone. That someone is you. Tommy's jaw clenched, but he nodded. 1 hour, not a second longer. Kane took a deep breath, checked his revolvers one last time, and pushed through the saloon doors. Inside, Christmas had been transformed into a nightmare. 20 men with guns stood scattered throughout the room, holding hostages, men, women, and children who'd been at the church service, now huddled together in terror. Behind the bar stood 3 men who had to be the Cordell brothers. Jack, the oldest, with a scar bisecting his face. Sam, the middle brother, twitchy and mean-eyed. And William, the youngest but somehow the cruelest looking, with a smile that promised pain. Jack was clearly the leader. He sat at Kane's usual table, a deliberate insult, with his boots on the surface and a bottle of Kane's private whiskey in his hand. Well, Jack drawled. The famous wolf. I expected someone bigger. Kane walked slowly into the room, his hands visible and empty, though his guns remained holstered. You wanted me. Here I am. Let these people go. See. That's not how this works, Jack said, taking a drink straight from the bottle. We let them go. We got no leverage, and we need leverage to have a proper negotiation. What do you want? What everyone wants, Jack gestured broadly. Money, territory, respect. We've been watching you, Kane. Watching you go soft, watching you turn your back on everything that made you powerful. We figure it's time for new management in Red Canyon, so this is a takeover. Kane let his eyes sweep the room, counting hostages 12 total, including 5 children, and assessing the Cordells' men. Experienced gunfighters, all of them. This wouldn't be easy. Smart and pretty, Sam said with a laugh. No wonder you lasted so long. Kane ignored him, focusing on Jack. Here's my counteroffer. You let these people go, get on your horses, and ride out of my territory. Do that. And you live, stay, and I'll kill every last one of you. The saloon erupted in laughter, 20 armed men laughing at one man's threat. Jack wiped tears from his eyes. You really have gone soft. You think you can take all of us? You're not armed. You're outnumbered. And your cane moved. Years of surviving in a world where hesitation meant death had honed his reflexes to razor sharpness. His hands flashed to his guns, and he fired 4 times before anyone could react, not at the cordels, but at the lamps hanging from the ceiling. Darkness exploded through the saloon as the lamps shattered, plunging everyone into chaos. Gunfire erupted wildly as the Cordell's men fired at shadows. Kane dropped to the floor and rolled behind the bar, bullets chewing up wood where he'd been standing. Don't shoot the hostages, you idiots, Jack was screaming. Light! We need light! But in the darkness and confusion, Kane had the advantage. He knew the saloon better than anyone, every table, every chair, every loose floorboard. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, like the predator he'd always been. One of the Cordell's men lit a match, and Kane shot him through the wrist. The man screamed and dropped the match, plunging them back into darkness. 2 more men tried to light lamps, and Kane took them down with precise shots, wounding, not killing. He didn't want to kill if he could avoid it, but he needed them disabled and afraid. Where is he? Sam was shouting. Where the hell is he? Everywhere. Kane's voice came from the darkness, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. I'm everywhere in this room, and every second you stay here, more of your men are going down. Kill him, William screamed. Just kill him. More wild gunfire. More bullets tearing through the saloon. One of the children was crying, a high, terrified sound that cut through the chaos. Kane felt rage, cold and focused, flood through him. They'd brought children into this. They'd terrorized innocents on Christmas Eve. They would pay for that. Kane moved again, circling through the darkness, and found 3 men clustered together for safety. He emerged from behind them like a nightmare, using the butt of his revolver to knock them unconscious before they knew he was there. Then he was gone again, swallowed by shadows. Light the whole damn place, Jack ordered. Burn it down if you have to. I want to see him. You sure about that? Kane asked from the darkness. Because once you can see me, I can see you too. And I don't miss. Someone managed to get a lamplit finally, casting flickering light across a scene of chaos. Bodies, unconscious or wounded, lay scattered across the floor. Of the 20 men the Cordells had brought, fewer than 10 were still standing. The hostages had pressed themselves against the far wall, trying to stay out of the line of fire. Kane stood behind the bar, both revolvers out, and aimed. His face was grim, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. He looked like the wolf of legend again, dangerous, unstoppable, merciless. Here I am, Kane said quietly. Now what? Jack had his gun out, but his hand was shaking slightly. He'd expected easy prey. He'd gotten a predator instead. You're crazy. You could have died. All for these people? All for these people, Kane confirmed. That's what you don't understand, Jack. I'm not soft. I'm just focused. I save my violence for people who deserve it. And you deserve it. Kill him, William screamed, raising his gun toward Kane. But Kane was faster. His shot took William in the shoulder, spinning the younger Cordell around and dropping him to the floor with a scream. Sam tried to dive for cover, but Kane's second shot caught him in the leg, and he went down hard. That left Jack, who suddenly realized he was facing Kane alone with a gun he was too scared to use. Drop it, Kane said. His voice was conversational, but his eyes promised death. Drop the gun, let these people go, and take your brothers out of my town. Last chance. Jack looked around at his defeated crew, at his wounded brothers, at the cold certainty in Kane's eyes. Slowly, he set his gun on the table. Smart choice, Kane said. Now get out. The Cordells and their remaining men scrambled to gather their wounded and flee into the night. Kane watched them go, his gun still drawn, until the last horse had disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he holster his weapons and turn to the hostages. Everyone all right? His voice had softened, the predator receding. Anyone hurt? A woman holding a small child stepped forward. You saved us. They were going to kill us. I know, Kane said simply, but you're safe now. Doc Sullivan pushed through the crowd, his medical bag already in hand. Let me check everyone over. Make sure no one caught a stray bullet. Kane nodded and walked outside, suddenly exhausted. The cold air hit him like a slap, clearing his head. Tommy was there immediately, eyes wide. "Boss, I heard all that shooting. I was about to. I'm fine," Kane said, though his hands were shaking slightly with adrenaline. "Hostages are safe. Cordell's are running scared. Town's secure. You took on 20 men alone." Tommy's voice was filled with awe. "That was the craziest, bravest thing I've ever seen. It was the necessary thing," Kane corrected. "There's a difference." Over the next hour, the town slowly emerged from hiding. Word spread that the wolf had faced down the Cordells alone, that he'd risked his life to save hostages, that he'd proved once and for all that his new code didn't make him weak, it made him more dangerous than ever, because now his violence had purpose and direction. Kane was sitting on the saloon steps, cleaning blood off his guns, when Sarah arrived. She'd ridden hard from the ranch, had left Lily with neighbors, and her face was pale with fear that turned to relief when she saw him alive. "You idiot," she said, her voice shaking. "You complete and utter idiot." "I had it under control," Kane said mildly. "You had nothing under control. You could have died." Sarah's hands were fisted in her skirt, her whole body trembling. "You could have died, and then what? What would I tell Lily? What would I tell?" She stopped abruptly, as if she'd said too much. Kane stood slowly, understanding dawning. "Sarah, don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't say anything. I know what you are. I know what you've done." But somewhere along the way, against all sense and reason, I started to care whether you lived or died. And tonight, listening to those gunshots, I realized I care more than I should. Kane was silent, processing this confession. He'd spent so long denying himself human connection that he barely recognized it when offered. I know you don't deserve it," Sarah interrupted. "But that's not how feelings work. They don't ask for permission or wait for worthiness. They just are." She met his eyes. "So if you're going to keep doing this, keep risking your life for justice, then you need to understand that people care. That I care. And you don't get to throw your life away carelessly." Kane found himself moving toward her without conscious decision, drawn by something he couldn't name. He stopped a foot away, close enough to see the tears on her cheeks, close enough to feel the heat of her anger and fear and something else. "I can't promise I won't take risks," he said quietly. "The life I've lived, the enemies I've made, danger is constant now." "I know," Sarah whispered. "But promise me you'll try to come back. Promise me you won't give up." "I promise," Kane said, and meant it. They stood there in the cold Christmas night, the town quiet around them, something fragile and new building between them. Kane had never thought he'd have this someone who saw all of him, the monster and the men trying to be better, and cared anyway. It terrified him. It gave him hope. Spring came to Red Canyon, bringing wildflowers that carpeted the desert in unexpected color and rains that turned the red earth green for a few precious weeks. The town had changed in the months since Christmas. The new sheriff, an honest man from Denver, was establishing real law. Local businesses were thriving without the weight of protection money. Children played in the streets without fear. And Kane's organization, though smaller and less profitable, had become something unique. A criminal enterprise with a code, outlaws for justice, men who robbed from corrupt officials and land barons who'd made their fortunes exploiting others. They weren't heroes. Kane never pretended they were, but they were better than they'd been. On a warm April afternoon, Kane rode out to the Hart Ranch for what had become his weekly visit. Sarah's land was beautiful in spring, the stream running full and clear, the cottonwoods leafing out in bright green. He found Sarah in the garden she'd planted, her hands dirty and her face flushed with the pleasure of honest work. "James," she greeted him with a smile that still surprised him every time. "You're early. Finished business in town faster than expected," he said, dismounting. "Where's Lily?" "With Tommy, checking the fence line. She's decided she wants to be a rancher when she grows up." Sarah stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "She also talks about becoming a sheriff, and a teacher, and a doctor. 8-year-olds have ambitious dreams. She'll be good at whatever she chooses," Kane said. "She's brave enough for anything." Sarah looked at him with affection and amusement. "You've gotten soft about her." "Maybe," Kane admitted. "She saved my life, in a way. Seems fair to be soft about that." They walked together toward the house, And Kane noticed details that spoke of prosperity: new paint on the walls, repaired roof shingles, the barn door hanging straight on new hinges. The Hart Ranch was thriving, and Sarah was thriving with it. The fear and grief that had shadowed her face when they first met had faded, replaced by confidence and peace. "I've been thinking," Sarah said as they reached the porch, "about the future, about what happens next." "What do you mean?" Sarah turned to face him, and Kane saw something serious in her expression. "You can't do this forever, James. This life you're living, it's better than it was, but it's still dangerous, still illegal. Eventually, the law or a rival or someone from your past is going to catch up with you." "I know," Kane said quietly. He'd been thinking the same thing lately, feeling the weight of his years and his choices. "I'm not sure there's a way out for someone like me. There's always a way out. You just have to be brave enough to take it." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah took a breath, gathering courage. "I'm suggesting you walk away. Really walk away. Leave the criminal life entirely. Settle down somewhere no one knows your name. Start over completely." Kane stared at her. "Sarah, I can't just. Why not?" she challenged. "You've already changed everything about how you operate. Why not take the final step? Why not choose a real life instead of this half-existence?" "Because men like me don't get real lives," Kane said, his voice rough. "We get bullets in the back and unmarked graves, only if you stay in the life." Sarah stepped closer. "James, I'm not saying this lightly. I'm not some naive woman who thinks love conquers all. But I am saying that you've earned a second chance, and you're wasting it by refusing to fully claim it. Love." Kane's voice cracked on the word. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "Yes, love. Somewhere along the way, despite all sense and reason, I fell in love with you. With the man you're trying to become. With the person who risks everything to protect others. With the complicated, contradictory, infuriating person you are." Kane felt like he'd been shot, like all the air had left his lungs. "I don't. I can't." "You can," Sarah said firmly. "You can choose this. Choose us. Choose a future instead of a past. But you have to actually choose it, James. You have to commit fully, not halfway." For a long moment, Kane just stood there, paralyzed by possibility. Everything he'd done over the past months had been about redemption, about being better, but he'd never allowed himself to imagine actually succeeding. He'd never let himself believe he could have a real life, a family, love. But Sarah was offering exactly that. "What would it look like?" he asked quietly. "This future you're imagining?" Sarah's eyes lit with hope. "We could move. California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere no one knows the wolf. You could be just James Kane, rancher. We could build a life together, you, me, Lily. A real family. And my organization? The men who depend on me. Give it to Frank or Tommy. Let them carry on if they want, or let them disband. Let them make their own choices." Sarah took his hands. "James, you've spent your whole life taking care of others through fear and control. Maybe it's time to let them take care of themselves." Kane looked down at their joined hands, hers small and calloused from work, his scarred and marked by violence. It seemed impossible that they could fit together, but they did. "I'm not a good man," he said, needing her to understand. "Changing my behavior doesn't change what I've done." "I know," Sarah said, "but good men don't need redemption, they're already good. It's the men who've made mistakes, who've hurt people, who've lost their way, those are the ones who need second chances. And you've earned yours." Kane pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her and holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned upside down. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of sage and sunshine, and for the first time in decades, he let himself cry. "I'm scared," he whispered against her shoulder. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am." "You'll learn," Sarah whispered back. "We'll learn together." They stood there on the porch while the sun climbed higher and the spring breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and the sound of Lily's laughter from somewhere across the ranch. Kane felt something breaking inside him, all the walls he'd built, all the hardness he'd cultivated, all the defenses that had kept him alive but alone. And in the breaking, he found freedom. 3 months later, on a clear summer morning, James Kane called together everyone who'd stayed with his organization. They met at the Silver Wolf one final time: Frank, Tommy, Six Fingers, and a dozen others who'd followed him through transformation and chaos. "I'm done," Kane told them simply. "I'm leaving Red Canyon, leaving this life entirely. The silver wolf is yours to do with as you choose. Keep it, sell it, burn it down. I don't care. My share of our various operations is being divided equally among you. Consider it payment for loyalty." Boss Frank started, but Kane held up a hand. "I'm not your boss anymore. I haven't been for a while now." Kane looked at each of them. "You've all changed these past months, become better men. Keep doing that, or don't. But make your own choices from now on." "Where will you go?" Tommy asked quietly. "Somewhere new. Somewhere I can be just another man trying to make an honest living." Kane smiled slightly. "Sarah and Lily are coming with me. We're going to try being a family." Six Fingers let out a low whistle. "The wolf domesticated. Never thought I'd see it." "Neither did I," Kane admitted. "But here we are." They drank together one last time, toasting to futures uncertain and pasts they were leaving behind. When Kane walked out of the Silver Wolf for the final time, he didn't look back. The next morning, a small wagon left Red Canyon heading west. In it sat Sarah, Lily, and James Kane, no longer the wolf, just a man with a second chance. They carried only what they needed: clothes, supplies, and hope. As they crested the hill that would take Red Canyon out of sight forever, Lily looked back at the town nestled in the red rocks. "Do you think people will remember us?" she asked. "Some will," Kane said. "They'll tell stories about the day a little girl walked into a saloon and demanded justice from a monster, and about how that monster remembered he was human." "You were never a monster," Lily said with absolute certainty. "You were just a person who forgot who you were supposed to be." "But she remembered. I helped you remember." Sarah squeezed Kane's hand and he squeezed back. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did. Thank you for that." As the wagon rolled on toward California and futures unwritten, the morning sun caught the red cliffs of the canyon, turning them to flame. Behind them, Red Canyon would continue without the wolf. Ahead, a new life waited for three people who'd found each other against impossible odds. And somewhere in the space between past and future, between who he'd been and who he was becoming, James Kane finally found peace.